We've all been warned against comparing apples to oranges. This fallacy is known as false equivalence, comparing two things as if they're equal, but when you look closer, they're not equal at all. False equivalence arguments can be persuasive because they simplify things. Rather than dig down into the details of how two things might be different from each other, it's simpler just to assume that they're equal. This fallacy is being used to justify the Trump administration wanting to reopen schools. When pressed on how to reopen safely, it's clear they have no plan, and any pesky science is being ignored.
You are sure, students, teachers, parents, that they will not get coronavirus because they're going back to school?
Well, the key is that kids have to get back to school.
We don't want CDC guidance to be a reason why people don't reopen their schools.
And if they do get COVID-19, which they will, and they will when they go to school, they're not going to the hospitals. They're not going to have to sit in doctor's office for days. They're going to go home, and they're going to get over it.
What do you tell parents and teachers who feel that it's unsafe to go back?
I would tell parents and teachers that you should find yourself a new person, whoever's in charge of that decision, because it's a terrible decision.
The president said today we just don't want the guidance to be too tough. And that's the reason why next week CDC is going to be issuing a new set of tools.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
Instead of developing plans to reopen safely, Trump resorts to false equivalence, arguing that European countries reopen their schools safely, so it's safe for the US to reopen their schools. The problem is the two situations aren't equal. European countries could safely reopen because they'd already crushed the curve.
Germany, Norway, so many countries right now, they're open, the schools are open, and they're doing just fine.
We've seen this in countries, other countries in Europe and elsewhere in the world, where students have gone back to school and have done so very successfully.
Everyone else in the Western world, our peer nations, are doing it. We are the outlier here.
Even when confronted with their own false equivalence, they respond with more false equivalence.
Is it reasonable to compare the situation in countries that have 20 new cases in a day with a country that has 68,000 new cases in a day?
Well, we're talking about schools and other countries' experiences with reopening schools, and it has been shown to be very successful. Kids have gone back to learning environments and have done so safely.
There's a reason why European countries waited until they'd crushed the curve before reopening. Contact tracing is impossible when a pandemic is raging out of control. It's like trying to mop up the ocean. To avoid being misled by false equivalence, learn the various forms it can take, and look past any superficial similarities to see if there are differences that make the comparison invalid. The first type of false equivalence is comparing apples to oranges, like comparing Europe to the US. The difference that makes this a false equivalence is that Europe crushed the curve, while cases are rising out of control in the US. The second type of false equivalence is the false analogy. We've looked at this in a previous week. A false analogy assumes wrongly that because two things are similar in one way, they're also similar in some other way. For example, this old argument reared its ugly head last week.
Mail-in ballots don't need to happen. Yesterday I was walking down the street and I saw about 100 people standing in line for Shake Shack. And I respected the heck out of the back half of that line for their dedication to fast food. We have been able to stand in line for things that are much less important than voting.
We've seen this false analogy before.
People are very proud to show up and go to the polls. They really are. I mean, they wait in line at Georgetown Cupcake for an hour to get a cupcake. So I think they can probably wait in line to do something as consequential and critical and constitutionally significant as cast their ballot.
This is an invalid comparison. Lining up for cupcakes or fast food is a luxury for those with the time and resources, while voting is a constitutional right. Everyone should be able to vote without risking their health. This difference makes it a false analogy. The third type of false equivalence is false balance, arguing that both sides of a debate should be given equal consideration.
You know the dark side. Anakin, If one is to understand the great mystery, one must study all its aspects, not just the dogmatic, narrow view of the Jedi.
Giving both sides equal weight is reasonable with political issues, but can be misleading when it comes to matters of science. We see false balance whenever there's science denial, whether it's denial of climate change, vaccination, or COVID-19.
We can listen to your advice, but there are people on the other side saying there's not going to be a surge and that we can safely open the economy, and the facts will bear this out.
If one view is based on science and data, and the other view is based on opinion or wishful thinking, they're not equivalent in quality. When you hear equivalence arguments, look past the similarities to see whether there are any differences that invalidate the comparison. Are they comparing apples to oranges? Are they using a false analogy? Or are they presenting false balance, where two viewpoints aren't equivalent in quality? Being able to spot meaningful differences in an inappropriate comparison is the key to not being misled by false equivalence.
He's forcing children to go back, cause Trump's polls are doggy-doo. The only letters she'll be teaching are F and also U.